Believe it or not, but we are already halfway through season 18 of South Park. Sad, I know. But with 5 episodes down, I wanted to go ahead and weigh in on everything so far. Now before getting into individual thoughts about each episode, I wanted to point out one thing that's been a little bit different about this season. That would be the continuity between some of the episodes, which we haven't really seen before with South Park. At least outside of like a part 1, part 2 format. The first 2 episodes of the season, for example, aren't tied together in a part 1 or part 2, but they have a running storyline from the first episode that plays a big role in the second episode. And while I've always liked that South Park has kind of stood alone with its episodes rather than having a consistent running storyline, being that that's so rare in TV to be standalone these days, it's kind of nice to have a few running gags, especially when we're only getting a 10-episode block once a year now. Anyway, let's break down episode by episode. The first scene of the first episode, Go Fund Yourself, was brilliant. You get this peaceful sunrise, Cartman laying in his bed all peacefully, all opened up by the first words of the season.
Boner balls.
Boner balls. The episode was pretty funny, and the shots they took at the Washington Redskins, the NFL, and the whole crowdfunding thing that's just kind of blown up. Not that I have a problem with it, it was just funny to see a take on it. The episode was well done, and I really enjoyed it. On the whole, a solid start to the season. Maybe not a great one, but solid enough to feel good about it. One thing about this episode that I think probably went unnoticed for a lot of people was the fact that in the commercials for it, you had Daniel Snyder, the owner of the Washington Redskins, approaching Cartman in his office. And while that scene actually was in the show, you'll notice a slight difference from the commercial versus the actual episode. You see, in the commercial, the Redskins player they had with Daniel Snyder was Robert Griffin III. But it was clear by the time the episode aired that Robert Griffin was going to be out for a while, and Kirk Cousins was the current starting quarterback for the Washington Redskins. And sure enough, updating things to be as current as possible, South Park plugged in Kirk Cousins into the episode. All of it's kind of moot right now since it's sort of the Colt McCoy show, but whatever, it was pretty cool to see at least. The second episode, Gluten-free Ebola. Here is where shit got real. The whole gluten-free thing had undoubtedly reached social fad level South Park. Way up here. And South Park hit it hard, and they hit it well. A lot of this episode had the same kind of feel as people running from global warming or putting their heads in the sand over fear of a cartoon of Muhammad. But it's always fun to see the citizens of South Park do that. The whole thing with Randy Marsh being put in quarantine for drinking a beer and not knowing that it had gluten in it was hilarious. And then obviously the subsequent scene with the guy eating the bread dough in Papa John's and his dick rocketing off because he ate gluten. Let's move on to the third episode, The Sissy. I learned what an SJW, or social justice warrior, was in the hype leading up to this episode because once the commercial came out and the kind of plot line was out there, the internet freaked out. The freak out was in full effect, actually, with the thought of South Park taking on issues surrounding transgender people. I think a lot of people were nervous that South Park was going to do some kind of slam on transgender people, but I think in the end, the message they had was actually pretty positive. Basically saying that if you're weirded out by people using the restroom that they identify their gender with, that you're the weirdo, not that. Obviously, I'm sure plenty of people were offended anyway, but really, who has been off limits to South Park thus far? Me, myself, I've had plenty of things that I like or personal beliefs that have had fun poked at them, as has probably everyone. Really, the best thing you can do is just enjoy the humor, laugh along with everyone else, and just accept that laughter is the best medicine. Speaking of which, huge ups to Lorde for playing along with the fun. She got made fun of as much as anyone in this whole thing and totally took it in stride. I know it may be as simple as just her in a video saying, yeah, I am Lorde.
Yeah, I'm Lorde. Yeah.
But that's like the phrase of the season so far, poking fun at her, and she totally owned it, and huge props to her for that. The next episode was Handy Car, which takes on the whole kind of future transportation and does it hilariously. This one relied heavily on Nathan and Mimsy trying to overthrow Timmy in his quest to raise enough money for summer camp, which Nathan doesn't want to go to. This all culminates in a worldwide freakout over the return of Wacky Races. I don't know entirely what to say about this episode other than that I really liked it for some reason. The Matthew McConaughey blasts were hilarious, Nathan and Mimsy were amazing, the Wacky Races thing was great. Everything about it just made me laugh a whole ton, even though nothing about it was super impactful. It was just funny to see a small issue out there get tackled and done so well with a lot of just random hilarity thrown in. Finally, last night's episode, The Magic Bush, took on a couple of issues between nude celebrity photo leaks and Ferguson, Missouri. I wouldn't say anything about this episode was super hard-hitting or profound from a social standpoint. Is that a thing? But it was still funny. On first watch, I think this episode might have been my least favorite of the season so far. And on second watch, yeah, that's probably still the case. but I still laugh plenty, even though I think probably a few years from now, if you're scrolling through the list of episodes of South Park, it'll probably be one that you're not going to see and be like, oh man, gotta watch this one. I did get a kick out of Butters' dad repeatedly referencing the fact that Butters couldn't have possibly piloted the drone to take those pictures because he's not permitted to do so without his dad's supervision. I think everybody had a family or a kid in their neighborhood growing up where the parents always had that mentality of, well, my kid couldn't have possibly done anything wrong. So it was funny to see that kind of in this capacity in South Park. There was definitely some classic Cartman in this episode, both with the opening scene and his excitement over the drone, but also in the way he was willing to escalate the situation so much just to avoid getting caught. Picking out some highlights of the first half of the season so far, I would have to say the shots at the NFL, the Washington Redskins, Roger Goodell, and Jerry Jones especially, were hilarious. The thing with Lorde actually being Randy Marsh might be my favorite thing throughout the whole season so far. The entire Wacky Races scene was straight up hilarity, and dicks rocketing off people because they ate gluten. Has there ever been anything more South Park than that? If I were to give the season so far a letter grade, I would give it something between a B and a B+. For the sake of rounding up, let's just go with a B+. Anyway, that is the quick rundown of South Park Season 18 so far. Now that we're at the midway point, it has been South Park. They haven't lost any steam, and nothing is off limits, and it is still really freaking funny. Really sad that it's halfway over already, though, because we only get this once a year now. But, in the meantime, enjoy the next 5 episodes. When those are done, I'll probably be back to recap those.